You're listening to PD for the Soul, the podcast that centers the person behind the teacher badge and helps us align our practice with purpose. I'm so glad you're here. July is all about action. This month, we're digging deep into what it means to design lessons for the students who need us most, and that's all of them. We're not just talking about good teaching. We're talking about intentional, equity-centered teaching that prioritizes students on the margins, creates strong foundations, and supports diverse learners every step of the way. Here's what's coming up. In our first solo episode, I'm asking a question that should be at the heart of every plan. Who are my lessons designed for? Because if we're not careful, our default becomes the center, and our most vulnerable learners get left behind. Then I sat down with Leroy Smith for a powerful conversation on teaching students with disabilities, not as an afterthought, but as a starting point for instructional excellence. After that, we talked with Tara McCormick about how primary and middle school experiences shape high school success. This episode is all about creating a strong foundation early, academically and emotionally, because the reality is, although we're teaching them this year, it's not just our year that matters. And finally, we closed the month with one of the most important conversations of the season, a solo episode titled The Margins Are the Map, where I challenge us to redefine what rigor really means and whose brilliance we're centering in our math classrooms. Each episode this month pairs beautifully with the digital listening companion, which you can grab right now using the link in the show notes. It's filled with reflection prompts, space to capture your takeaways, and planning questions to help you turn insight into implementation. And one more thing. Starting August 1st, my birthday, this podcast will officially become the Make Math Happen podcast. Same soul, same purpose, but with a name that reflects the clarity, urgency, and action this work deserves. Because we're not just here to learn. We're here to make math happen for every single student. So let's get into it. It's time to move with intention, lead with clarity, and teach like it matters, because it does. See you in the show. Hey, educators, welcome back to PD for the Soul, the podcast where we dive deep into the moves that make math instruction more meaningful and impactful. I'm your host, Lanisha, and today we're tackling a topic that's critical for student success: how we prepare middle schoolers for the demands of high school math. Joining me is an incredible guest, Tara McCormick, a seasoned high school math coach who has spent years helping students transition smoothly from middle school to algebra and beyond. We'll be breaking down the essential skills, habits, and instructional strategies that truly set students up for success, not just in math class, but in their academic futures. We're also going to discuss the bigger picture. What are the real-world implications of success? How can middle school teachers better align their instruction to support this transition? And what systemic shifts need to happen to ensure all students are equipped to thrive? Plus, if you haven't already, our newsletter dropped on March 1st. It's your go-to spot for links to resources from today's episode, upcoming book recommendations, and a deep dive into making connections across math domains and grade levels. So be sure to sign up using the link in the show notes. All right, y'all, let's jump in. Tara, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Lamisha. I am happy to be here. I'm happy to share whatever little bit of knowledge I can share with your audience. I am so honored that you have given me this platform to speak on things that I've been experiencing over my 25 years of being a math educator. I don't pretend, to know everything, but I do have some things that I am definitely willing to and loving to share with you and your audience.
Thank you so much. So I want to just go ahead and jump in. So when we're thinking about preparing students for the success that we hope that they have in high school, what skills and habits do you see in students who thrive?
Students that thrive, that I see in high school, especially when they come in as freshmen, because typically when they come in as freshmen, if they haven't taken algebra or geometry in middle school, they come in taking algebra, and those are typically our struggling students coming in as a ninth grader taking algebra 1. But what I see, the skills that they have, a lot of math teachers want to talk about the foundational skills, the fundamental things that they say the kids don't, come in with. But what I see is the skills with reasoning and thinking. Given the opportunity to think, even if they come out with a wrong answer, they're thinking about it, giving them time to think and process things that are presented in front of them about content, about whatever, just having the ability to sit and process, to think about things and share their thoughts. And then as teachers, taking what they've given us and carrying it, on and kind of tapping into what they're saying to us and just continuing asking them questions to get them to think a little bit more. I think a lot of times with math and as math teachers, we think more of how to solve the problem instead of getting the students to think about the problem and right or wrong answers. A lot of kids don't want to share the fact that they may have gotten a wrong answer, but if they are being shown that that's a great thing when you get a wrong answer, because now we can sit there and analyze it and talk about it and see where we went wrong and talk about what we can do differently and the different procedures or steps that will get us into the right direction. So if we don't allow kids to make mistakes and to value those mistakes, then we're not doing what we need to do as math teachers.
You just dropped a lot. So a couple things that I want to highlight is we need students to have strong reasoning skills, those critical thinkers. So when you're talking about the students who are thriving in high school, it's the students who have the ability to make sense of the problems that they're being presented with. So my question is, actually, before I ask that question, there's something that you said that is so important. We need to create space for students to make mistakes. Too often, even us as teachers sometimes are looking for that right answer.
Yes.
And we can pose a question out to the whole group, somebody answers it, and we're ready to move on, not realizing that the other students in the class may not even had time to process it, don't even know what we're talking about, and
Correct.
definitely don't understand the answer that was given. So you also mentioned that wait time. So we have to be intentional with providing students with that wait time so they can make sense of what's being asked, but making them feel okay to make the mistakes is one of those key components of that. I need to be able to
Absolutely.
take the risk, be okay taking the risk. Okay.
Absolutely.
So now when we think about them coming from middle school, what is something that you feel like middle school teachers could do to better prepare the students for the rigor, specifically them being able to reason and critically think?
It's the questioning piece for me. A lot of times, and I taught 1 year of middle school, bless anybody's heart who has their whole career teaching middle school math, because that right there, that 1 year I spent teaching 7th grade advanced math was like very eye-opening. But the way I approached it, because I was a high school teacher prior to moving down to Florida, and I just wanted a job. So secondary down here in Florida was middle school and high school. So it was different in North Carolina when I taught in North Carolina. So I had experience, but I treated my 7th graders like they were my high school students. I didn't let them off the hook, made sure they understood the importance of being responsible. I think a lot of times what kids experience in middle school, and I'm not saying you can't give kids chances after chances to get things right, but they have to understand the meaning of responsibility. When I'm saying something is due when it's due, that is when it's due. And having them understand you have to turn this in. I'm not giving you a whole lot, but when I do give you what I'm giving you, you need to make sure you're doing it. My expectations are there, and you have to make sure that the students understand those expectations. And like I said, I'm not saying that teachers can't be lenient at times, because I was lenient as a high school math teacher, but my students understood. If Miss Fowler said, "Hey, I need to turn it in, this is her expectation," then they understood that and they made sure that they abided by what my expectations were. So, and I treated my 7th graders the same way. And I had parents, even my administrators saying, "Well, you can't you just lay off of them just a little bit? These are 7th graders." I said, "Yeah, and soon they're going to be high schoolers." And then when they get into high school, they're going to have teachers that are not going to be as understanding. And if they are understanding, they're still going to make sure that they understand that you have a responsibility as a student to do what you're supposed to do. And so I'm teaching them that now, because 2 years is going to go by so fast and they're going to end up being 9th graders. And then they have to start the process over again in a totally different new setting with new people, kids that are older than them, teachers who are not going to put up with silliness. Sometimes I think in middle school, a lot of times middle school teachers have to deal with them actually growing up, and then, saying, okay, well, they're just kids. They're just getting to know things. But if you start off in the beginning that way, I think that they have the expectation that we can't get away with a lot of things. Our teachers are expecting us to do what we need to do. And when we go where we need to go, that we're gonna be all right. So I think that's one of the skills, not just the math skills. Of course, we want them to know math, but just overall responsibility. They need to know what responsibility is, and understand that you carry that throughout your whole years of schooling, not just, in one particular area. So we have to equip them with that, because when I've seen kids come in as ninth graders and I'm like, oh my goodness. I'm like, okay, so we have to start all over again, with this. And sometimes, um, it's different. It's different. And me being in the different realms, and now in the position that I'm in, I get to go not only to high schools, but if I choose to go to elementary, if I choose to go to middle school, I get a chance to see the variety of how teachers interact with their students, how teachers share information to their kids about responsibility. I was just in the kindergarten's classroom on this past Friday, and those kids behave better than ninth graders. And these are kindergartners. These are babies. These are 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds. And so it was all of what the expectation that the teacher set for the students, and they understood it. Even at 5 years old, they understood what was expected of them.
Okay, so I'm hearing high expectations are key. So when we're talking about middle school teachers preparing their students to be successful in high school, high expectations have to be at the core of that. So the students
Yes.
need to understand that there is a level of responsibility that you have, and I'm going to hold you responsible or accountable for that as your teacher, and I would be doing you a disservice if I did not.
Absolutely.
Also, you mentioned something about questioning. So
Mm-hmm.
asking those questions, those deep questions that really
Mm-hmm.
force students to think, is going to prepare them for some of that rigor, some of that reasoning, critical thinking that you mentioned earlier. And
Mm-hmm.
then you said, I'm assigning them something. So we're being intentional with what we're assigning. We're not assigning you pages and pages of things. We're assigning you something that is intentional, that is going to prepare you or allow you to practice some skill concept. So I'm expecting you to turn it in.
Absolutely.
You need to turn it in, because I need to be able to give you feedback to let you know how you've done, how are you progressing towards the goal that we're working on. Another thing that I've noted is we got to train students to exhibit the behaviors of success.
Yes.
We cannot expect them to automatically know what it takes for them to be successful, no matter what grade they're in.
Absolutely.
We got to train them. And I think
Yeah.
sometimes that's something that we take for granted, is
It is
assuming that
absolutely.
they'll just figure it out. They won't.
Yeah, they won't. Even if you're in a classroom, and it can be algebra too. Like it can be juniors and seniors in the classroom. When you go into class, if the teacher doesn't model what's expected of them to do, then you're thinking, oh, and I was guilty of this. I'm not even going to lie about it. I was guilty of it. Like, oh my God, you are a junior, senior high school. I know you know how to act. I know you know expectations of how to do your homework, how to turn it in, how to do whatever. This is not your first year in high school. You should know. But then I realized, no, Tara, they don't know. They don't know. You have to model for them how to take notes. That's your expectation. You have to model for them how to ask themselves questions. Like if you want them to ask themselves questions as they're working through questions and working through problems, you have to model for them, what does that look like? What does that think aloud look like to myself when I'm trying to help myself process through a question, right? So we have to model that for them. Our expectations sometimes can be real high for kids. And we need to make sure whatever we want them to do, we have to show them what our expectations are of them in order for us to not be disappointed. Because I think we get disappointed as teachers, but have you done that? Have you shown them what you wanted them to do? You can't be disappointed if you haven't shown them. Now, if you've shown them over and over again and they're still not giving you what you're, what you want them to, then that you can, you can get a little disappointed, and then have the conversation with the kids. But if you haven't shown them anything, then you can't be upset. So then you have to go back and say, all right, I want them to do this. Now let me show them this is what I want them to do. And then you have to go from there. So if you want them to take notes, if you want them to be able to use their notes to help them support their learning, you have to model that for them. Modeling is the key. When you're wanting them to, hey, let me ask myself this question. Well, let me model what a think aloud looks like for my kids. When I'm going through a question, let me model what questions I ask myself so I can help myself process through the question. So they will say, oh, I can ask myself that question. I can ask myself these things to help me get to the answer I'm trying to get to. So we have to be able to model and not just assume that kids are going to do.
Whenever I first started teaching, I was so shocked at how, I guess, different students appear to be in that year versus whenever I was in school, not realizing that, when you're in school, sometimes you might not be in the same classrooms with all kids and things like that. Like there's a whole bunch of different things that happen with tracking and things like that, which is a whole nother conversation.
Yes.
But I was just so surprised at how much I expected kids to know, but they didn't actually know.
Mm-mm.
And coming in as a lateral entry teacher, I didn't go through like the teacher training program. I didn't do any of the shadowing, student teaching or anything like that. So I had no idea. I was coming in off the street. And as you mentioned earlier, you have high expectations or expectations of what you feel like students come to you with. And that might not always be the case. So I wrote down, assume nothing, train everything.
Absolutely.
Assume nothing, and you have to train them in everything that you need them to do.
Absolutely. And that not only goes for the students, but that goes for teachers we support. I don't care how long a teacher's been teaching. You should always know you can learn something. And as in my position now, where I'm supervisor over high school math, I'm still coach. I'm still coaching. I'm not only coaching teachers, but I'm also coaching administrators. So I can't assume that as an administrator, oh, you're supposed to know this. You're an administrator. So why am I having to? And then I realized, like, stop. Like, Tara, not all administrators taught math. Not all administrators know when they walk into a classroom, this is what they should expect to see in a math class. They don't know. They don't know at all, which is why this year it was so hilarious that my boss decided we were going to do a series of Don't Be Fooled. So when you walk in the classroom, don't be fooled in ELA. When you go into ELA class, don't be fooled by what you see. Like, these are the things you need to look for. Don't be fooled in a math class. Like, when you walk into a math class and you see kids working, oh, did you ask the kid what they were working on? Did you see the benchmark they were doing? Did you see the materials and resources that were given to the kids? Like, don't be fooled when you walk into these classes. These are the things that you need to look for. So we have to know that everybody doesn't know everything, so including us. So we have to realize that we have to treat people as if they don't know, even if they know a little bit of something. We still have to treat them as they don't know, and then give them all the information and resources that they can use in order for them to be able to be successful.
I'm thinking about students transitioning into high school. And we mentioned that if students have not taken algebra, for us in North Carolina, we call it Math 1. If they have not taken Math 1 in 8th grade, then they're entering into high school taking a foundational level course in that first semester and then Math 1 in that second semester. And I assume it's probably something similar in the state that you're in too, right? So
They
they
come in taking, well, they come in take Algebra 1 if depending upon what they received on their 8th grade assessment at the end of the year. And then if they come in with a 2 or higher, level 2 or higher, we really are looking at that halfway point, like you're that level 2, but you're closer on the level 3 side. And then you are able to, we're putting you in Algebra 1. But if you come in a little lower, like the level 1 or lower level 2, then we put you in what we call 1A, Algebra 1A, which is still algebra, but it's only half of the year of that course, and you take it for the whole year. So it's only the first half of it. We used to have Algebra 1A, and then you take 1B the second year. And that used to be the same case in North Carolina. It was 1A, 1B, or Algebra 1 when I taught in North Carolina. But then North Carolina switched to Math 1 and so forth and so on. So, but yeah, so, and it all depends when you're getting into that course, how as a teacher, how are you teaching that course? Because a lot of times, like you said earlier, when kids come in, we are assuming that they should know everything, right? But kids don't do math all year long. They don't do math in the summer all summer long. There are things that students forget, but that doesn't mean they haven't been shown, or it doesn't mean that they haven't had access to it. And so we have to tap into that access and help trigger what they have already gotten in their toolbox that they haven't used in a long time. And I think as math teachers, we forget that because we feel like we got to go back and teach everything, right? And so, but we have to understand we don't have to teach everything. We can tap into what they have, and then we can scaffold and differentiate to support what their needs may be.
Okay, so perfect segue to how have you seen high school teachers support students who do have those challenges with the foundational skills while still engaging them in that grade level content? Like, what are some of the things that you've seen, those strategies that you've seen those high school teachers do and do it well for students who are struggling in those areas?
Well, I can say this. Think about when we were in elementary school, right? I think the best high school teacher taught elementary. And I say that on the pedagogy sense, not necessarily the math content, but pedagogy wise. So think about it. You had one teacher that taught everything, right? But they had rotations, they had stations, they have different things that they were able to differentiate and scaffold with their kids because they knew their kids. And so when students leave elementary and they go to middle school, that gets lost. That rotation, that station, it gets lost. And then they come to high school and it's even more lost because you have high school teachers that have been in high school and teaching for forever for the most part, and they have their system, their own system. But the best teachers that I've seen to address kids, and it's not really deficiencies, but to address kids' needs, have rotations and stations in their classroom. And they are part of that rotation and station. So they have it where one station could be them practicing on prior knowledge. Let me see where you are. Let me see what you know, what you don't know. So that's one. Another station may be, okay, you were part of the whole group lesson, so I want you to practice on that. And then one rotation could be you. So as you're monitoring, and that's the key, that's something that we don't necessarily do as secondary teachers, and I'm including middle school and high school in this, we don't monitor our kids because you said earlier, one kid says the answer and then the teacher moves on. I may be sitting there and I'm like, well, how'd they get that answer? And that teacher doesn't have that student expound on how they did it, or the teacher doesn't ask that student who they see are puzzled, because kids in high school are not going to raise their hand and say, I don't understand. They're going to say, their facial expression is going to say everything. Oh, I have no clue on how this student got this, or they'll put their heads down. So for one, I know the best teachers who do understand kids' misunderstandings and where their needs are. They monitor closely about what their kids do. They monitor closely, whether it be checks for understanding, and they assess right then and there. Okay, I see right now we didn't get that. Okay, this is something that we need to go back to a prior knowledge, or they see the confusion, or what have you. They monitor that and they look at that feedback, and then they find a way to get that as a part of their system in class. So and high school teachers, we don't think about stations or rotations. We don't think about that. Not at all. We're like, oh, that's so elementary. But when they leave elementary, they have the skills. They have the skills to process. They have the skills to answer questions if whatever questions are posed to them. They have the ability to do that, and it gets lost when it gets to secondary, and secondary meaning middle and high school. It gets lost. And then we struggle as high school teachers trying to figure it out. How can we help them? But we can't get out of our own ways sometimes to make that happen. But the teachers that I see that master it the best are the teachers that monitor closely with feedback for their kids. And it's not just one, twice, 3 times. They monitor on a consistent basis as they're teaching the lesson. And then they're setting up, whether it be during that same period or the next day, they set up stations or rotations, and they are a part of that rotation for their kids, because now they can bring in small group and work with a group of kids to support that. And you don't see that very often in middle school. You definitely don't see that very often in high school.
All right. So, educators out there listening, if you're in secondary, go ahead on and dust off your stations, pull those tools out.
There you go.
And set them up. You have your teacher-led station, and then you have your other stations, so that you can truly differentiate for your students and meeting them where they are. And I know some people might be thinking like, it's going to take so much time to put those things together. Tell me something about that. I saw you lean back. So what do you have to say about the time that it takes to put those stations and rotations together?
I'm not gonna lie. It takes time, but the key thing about it, once you plan it out, it becomes second nature. But the key word I said was plan. A lot of times we don't plan. We think we've taught this so many times. Why do we need to plan it? You need to plan. You need to have your resources out in front of you. You need to look at it, everything. And when I say resources, I mean, you need to know what benchmark are you teaching for today. So here in Florida, we have our standard, but for the most part, under the standard, you have the benchmark. So we teach, through benchmarks. North Carolina, you have standards. We have our benchmarks. And so if you don't know that day what benchmark or benchmarks you're teaching, you need to have that resource in front of you, number one. What is your intention? What do you want? This is the question I always ask myself. What is it that you want the kids to understand when they leave your classroom that day? Even if it's not the whole entire lesson, what is it that you want your kids to learn, to get, to understand before they leave your classroom? And that is timing it out. And a lot of times there's a lot of wasted time in math classes. It is. It's a lot of wasted time, because as math teachers, we don't necessarily plan intentionally about what we want our kids to get. And we have to do that. And being in my position, and this is going on my 6th year, but even as a coach, when I was embedded coach, when I was just the overall coach for the district, I kind of, I sat back and I just said, it's a lot of people don't plan. A lot of people say, as math teachers, especially if you've been teaching for a long time, I could teach this in my sleep. I don't need it. No, you need to plan this, because these are not the same kids you taught 5-6 years ago. And it's not the same benchmarks that you taught 5-6 years ago. So just because you may have a resource, quote unquote, that you think you can use because you've been teaching this forever, how is this being assessed at the end of the year? How is this being assessed? And just because you have something doesn't mean that that's how it's going to be assessed at the end of the year. So you have to really, truly be intentional when you're planning, and be intentional with activities. Again, what do you want your students to get out of the activities that you are giving to them in class? Do you want them to collaborate better? Do you want them to question each other better? Like, what is it that you want them to get? But in order for you to do that, you have to intentionally plan. So yes, in the beginning, you have to have that thought process and think about what is it. But once you do that, then it becomes effortless. Like, okay, let's set up this rotation. Let's set up this station. This is where you go. Kids know the routine. You set that routine up. Kids know how to follow it. They go through it. And it's like, okay, a well-oiled machine. And then if you want to come up with something new, then you say, okay, now how am I going to plan this out? And then you let the kids know, again, that's that word, expectation. This is my expectation when we're doing this. And you let them know, this is the outcome. This is what I want you to get. So they know what the outcome is. So they know what your expectations are and what you want them to get out of the lesson or the activity. So planning is a huge thing, which sometimes it doesn't get done.
The first time that I ever went viral on TikTok, it was because I made a post about planning. and how important it was. And them people was lighting me up in them comments.
Oh, I'm sure they were. I'm sure they
Everybody
were.
got time to plan. When I go
Uh-huh.
home,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I'm clocking out. My contract hours end at this time.
Mm-hmm.
Although I understand the frustration around pay and meetings and feeling like your time is not protected throughout the day so that you can plan, the reality is we signed up for a job to teach these kids. And for me, I wanted to always make sure that I was prepared to go
Yes.
in there to teach those kids every single day, even
Yes.
though that might have meant sometimes I
Yes.
was working after school or
Yes.
sometimes I was working on the weekends. Now I did become smart. I
You do.
realized
Yeah.
that if I invest a lot of that time on the front end, that
Mm-hmm.
over time I'm making small tweaks
Yes.
to accommodate the new group of students that I have in my class.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
used to do a lot of, I taught seventh grade. So I used to do
Mm-hmm.
a lot of differentiation in my class. I would teach the kids how to use or how to read the software that we use to do our data so that
Mm-hmm.
they knew that if I
Yes.
was this color, I needed to work on this. Once they learn how to read it, I had a document that they can go in, look for that verbiage, that language
Yes.
that matches up with that standard that they were red or yellow in. They
Yes.
can click this button and they can go practice that skill because
Yes.
I knew that it was impossible for me to hit every single thing myself. So I had to
Absolutely.
leverage technology to make sure that I was giving those kids what it was that they needed. Did it take time? Yeah, it did.
Yeah, but you didn't have to worry about it anymore once you taught them how to do it because they knew, okay, guys, let's look at this bench. Where are you at on this? And they knew how to go in, log in, and do what they needed to do. I think a lot of times when we're so embedded in ourselves all the time, I think when we are thinking, I can't learn this new thing. It's been working fine for me. Has it been really working fine? Has it? Have you really assessed yourself to see has it been working, or are you just going with the status quo that you've been doing for years and years and years? Because I think overall, as educators, like you mentioned before, it's time to clock out. It's time to do whatever. I never, and that was just me. Even as a new teacher, you stay a little bit later because you want to be perfect, you want to do whatever. But even in my 10th or 12th or 13th year teaching, I was still the last person to leave off of campus because I never felt comfortable winging it. Never. I don't care how many times I taught a lesson. I never felt comfortable winging anything because I never knew who was coming into my room, pop in, right? Never knew. And so I'm not going to wing it and think, oh, I've taught this before. I don't need to look at anything. No. So I just never did it. And even with, like you said, lessons that you've done, and you've gotten it written down, you say, oh yeah, I can. And it's nothing wrong with you going back and tweaking anything. There's nothing wrong with that. But you got to make sure what you have fits what you're doing right now. And a lot of teachers don't do that. I'm experiencing that right now with some of my math teachers. When you're using resources just because it may be easier for you to give to your kids, who's that benefiting? Is that benefiting your kids, or is that just saving you time with planning? So you have to kind of think about that. And at the end, you cannot be surprised at your data. When your data looks the way it looks, you have to go back and say, well, what did I do? What did I not do? Did you give them the proper materials at the proper rigor that they needed to have to be able to pass this assessment or do well on this assessment? And I know teaching to the test, I'm not saying do that. But if you're teaching the benchmarks, if you're teaching the content, it'll take care of itself when the kids go in and take the assessment because you taught them what they needed to know. It's not, I'm just gonna wing it. Oh, they need to know this, so I'm gonna teach them this. No, you wasting time. Let's not waste time. Let's think about what they need to know. And just because it's in the book, don't mean you have to teach it. No, you don't. You don't need to do that. So, and again, that's where planning comes in. And yes, we don't get paid a whole lot as educators. We know that. I never got into education to get paid. I just never did. I got it because I love kids. And I love to be a part of kids' lives, to see them, even though they may get on your nerves during the time they're with you. Like I said, God bless anybody who teach middle schoolers. Woo-hoo, I tell you. But when I saw those middle schools I taught in 7th grade, and they came to high school once I transferred back to high school, I said, my goodness. And they remember. I remember when you told me, I remember when you wrote me up, or I remember when you did whatever. I said, well, yeah, but you learned though, didn't you? And they said, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And so it's about making sure we are producing productive citizens at the end. And so we have a stake in that.
So I want to think about, we've been talking about how to make sure they're prepared. We've been talking about supporting them. If there was a way that you could sum up the best way for us to bridge the gap between middle school and high school. Middle school is my jam. That's where I've been. I know you support all grade levels, but your focus is really in like high school, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes.
if there was one thing that you could kind of give us that would help us bridge the gap between middle and high school, what would it be?
We'll say, and to me, it's not just middle and high school. To me, it's K-12. And if we don't go visit each other, if we don't go and offer PD with each other, then we can't have that conversation. I have my counterparts who is me as an elementary math specialist, and then I have my middle school math specialist counterpart. And we were talking about this, like, if you're not close with those people that you work with on all levels, then you don't see what the others see. You're not getting a chance to have that conversation. So it's nothing for me to go ask the middle school specialist, hey, what are you guys teaching? Like, right now, like what are you doing right now? So if your 8th grade teachers are doing this right now, this is what's going to help the students when they get into Algebra 1 next year. So having that conversation and sitting down with each other as an elementary teacher, as a middle school teacher, as a high school teacher, and having that conversation. And it's even better now here that we all have the same strands of standards. So AR, algebraic reasoning in elementary school could be AR 1-3, and this is the beginning of AR 1-3. But algebraic reasoning, AR 1-3 in 6th grade is adding to what we did in 5th grade. Well, if that 5th grader doesn't know what they're going to have in 6th grade, how are they going to prepare them for that next grade level? And that is because there's no conversation, right? And so if there's no conversation about what's next in the strand and what's next with that benchmark in the next grade, then, we're just teaching to be teaching. So we all responsible, even though when they get to high school, high school teachers think, oh, it's on me to graduate them. No, really, it's on that kindergarten teacher all the way through to make sure that kid graduates. And so if we don't have those conversations with each other, we don't do professional development with each other, if the supervisors don't speak to each other about next steps, then there's no collaboration, there's no understanding about bridging that gap and that system. Because they don't just have what they have in elementary and then they come to us and we're like, what's happened? Oh my God, what did they not get in elementary? What did they not get in middle school? Like, how come they don't know how to add and subtract? And when I ask them that without using, let that go. Let that go. We got them now. We have to let that go, and we have to be able to work through that, because in the end, we got to get them over the finish line, right? But in the beginning, if an elementary school teacher knows what expectation is down the road, then the elementary school teacher can prep them as they're teaching, and the middle school teacher can prep them as they're teaching. And then when they get into algebra, we can prep them as they're teaching. Even with algebra and geo, they are two different courses, absolutely. But you need algebraic skills and reasoning to do some geo. And if they don't know those basic skills, they're going to struggle. So that's why that geo teacher and that algebra 1 teacher have to talk. Hey, I need them to know how to use the slope. I need them to know how to make sure they can solve equations perfectly, because when we get to here in this part of geo, they need to know how to do that. So if we don't have that conversation, then it's going to always be a struggle. And so this summer, we have a K-12 or K through geo PD. So that way, we're elementary school teachers, middle school teachers, high school teachers can work together to look at how the benchmarks evolve. And so we'll know what they know. We'll know what the teachers are teaching them before they get to us. And then we can build on that as they come through. But if we don't ever have that conversation, it's not going to happen. It's always going to be a struggle.
I remember whenever I was teaching ninth grade, I used to always sign up anytime they had any type of PD in the county that was like foundations of math or, some type of vertical alignment focus. I was signing up, and I was always the only high school teacher there. And I know they were looking at me like, why are you here?
Why
Because
are you
I want to
here?
know where they're coming from. I want to know how y'all taught it so that I can use that to meet them or use that to engage them in my grade level. But I was always the only one that did that. It's so interesting. And I asked, how can we bridge the gap between middle school and high school? Because we do know that is sometimes a challenging transition. But you're right. We really need to be thinking about K-12.
Yes.
How are we transitioning these students from K2 to 3-5, from 3-5 to 6-8, from 6-8 to 9-12? How are we making sure that they are prepared to make those transitions? Because they are some pretty huge transitions.
Yes.
Another thing that you said that I want to amplify is we got to let go of the deficit mindset. Students come to us and they don't have these foundational skills. It really does nobody any good for us to complain about what is not here, what is not present. Instead, we need to be focusing on the assets. What did they come with us with? And how can we use what they came to us with to get them closer to where we need them to be?
Absolutely.
Point blank, period.
Yeah, that's it. Because you can't go back and reteach. As an Algebra 1 teacher, I can't go back and reteach 3rd, 4th, 5th grade. I can't go back and teach 6, 7, and 8. I can't go back and teach that. But I can have resources that have been provided for me that I can give the students opportunity to go back for themselves to practice. So that's one thing we look at when we purchase resources for our teachers. Like, are they able to utilize the platform to look at prior knowledge or prior things, prior concepts to get them comfortable? Because a lot of times kids know a lot than we give them credit for. Right now, we have it where we provide our teachers with data. And that's another thing. If you don't look at data, you don't look at who's coming into your class, you can't assume. And a lot of times we assume as math teachers, I'm speaking for math, we assume that they don't know. And guess what? They gonna let you assume that they don't know because it's easier for them and they don't want to be challenged. So when they realize, oh, we got this, but we ain't gonna say nothing because this easy. So, and they're gonna let you do it. But if you come off rip with a rigorous task and you're giving them steps to help them figure it out, and along the way you're tapping into their prior knowledge, then they say, oh, I don't feel like this is such a burden on me. Because sometimes when kids come in math, they feel like it's a burden because it's something they have. Math hurts, and they have math hurts. We as teachers have math hurts. We didn't always have the best math teachers that made us feel like we got something wrong, that's a celebration. No, they looked at us like, oh, no, that's wrong. Which, if we think about it, a lot of math teachers teach the way they were taught math. So we have to take that stereotype away and celebrate. Like, my kids look at me crazy when I said, oh, great job, we got it wrong. Yay. They're looking at me like, that's why I got it wrong. I said, yeah. And we about to figure out what we did wrong so we can get the right answer. But if you don't celebrate that, if they don't think that it's okay, then they're gonna always be like, I'm not gonna raise my hand because I know I'm gonna answer the question wrong and I'm not gonna look stupid. And that's the first thing they say. I'm not gonna look stupid. But if you celebrate that, then you have kids to be like, well, I don't know if it's right, but I know that it's a safe space. And when you make math class a safe space for kids, then it's endless. We want to make little mathematicians. So that's the thing.
And all of our students have the ability to be mathematicians. I think
absolutely
we have to start off with that belief. I had to ask some teachers that the other day, how many of your students do you believe had the ability to be proficient to succeed? And I had a teacher who was pulling out that keyboard and she was just a-clacking, trying to look up the students who were on. Look up her data. No, how many students do you believe?
Yes. Not what they came in here with. How many do you believe?
Okay, so we talked about a lot tonight. Some of the highlights from our conversation is we really need to build in those reasoning skills. And
Mm-hmm.
although tonight's conversation really focused on middle school to high school, we can start building those reasoning skills in elementary school,
And
right?
they do. They do. Yes,
Absolutely.
they do.
We need to make sure that we're providing students with wait time so that they have time to process things and critically think, and that we're not producing robots, kids who are just copying and pasting what they see us do. We want to make sure that we're creating a safe space for mistake making. So you
Yes.
just mentioned how when your students are making mistakes or you've seen students make mistakes, you're kind of cheering them on and they're
Mm-hmm.
looking at you like, why?
Mm-hmm.
Because mistakes are how we learn.
Mm-hmm.
People who have invented things, people who have created things that people are using that are making lives easier, they did not just come out and it was
Mm-mm.
perfect.
Mm-mm.
They had to
Sports.
mess up
Yeah,
a lot of
athletes,
time.
please. Athletes don't eventually when they get born, they go straight to the NFL or straight to NBA. They have to work and practice and make mistakes and learn from them and keep it moving. So until we realize sometimes we have to treat math as a sport, and let them know it's okay, you know?
It's okay. It's okay to make the mistakes. Another thing that we talked about this evening is how we got to train those students to exhibit those behaviors of success. So
Yes.
since you're using the sports example, I'm gonna use a sports example too.
There you go,
So they
sis.
say that you have to practice how you're gonna play.
That's right.
You got to practice how you're gonna play.
That's
So
right.
whenever the students are in the classroom, we got to make sure that we're training them on what it looks like to be successful. So those think alouds, modeling them for them so
Mm-hmm.
that they can see or can hear what type of questions should I be asking myself?
Yes.
What type of annotation should I be making as I'm reading through this story problem? All of
Yes.
these things we should be doing to set our students up. One
Mm-hmm.
question that I wrote down is I want teachers out there to reflect upon, is your classroom framework working? Because if the way that you have your classroom set up right now, if the way things are moving now is not working, if you don't see it as being successful, then you might need to make some changes.
Make some changes. Absolutely.
Need to make some changes. And I mentioned this in a previous episode where doctors have the Hippocratic Oath.
Yes.
I am taking that for teachers as well. We
Absolutely.
have to commit to doing no harm.
Absolutely.
When you look around, if what you're doing in your classroom is doing harm, you got to nix it. It has to
You
go.
have to understand malpractice. If you're not, and literally, me and my boss said this, if you're not using things that have been given to you to use, if you're pulling stuff just to be pulling stuff, or you have something that you had 20 years ago and you say, I want to use it because I used it 20 years ago, that's malpractice. Every doctor, every lawyer, any type of vocational, you have to re-app your certification to be able, and new things happen and new things come up where you have to learn these things to be recertified. So they can't go back and pull stuff from 20 years ago. A doctor can't do that. That's malpractice waiting to happen. As a teacher, malpractice you are doing when you feel like you have the opportunity and have the audacity to do it. And because you just think because you've been doing it for so long. That's malpractice. That's malpractice. No, we don't sit here and take an oath. We don't, but you should.
We should. That is exactly it. We need to, and I see it all too often where we feel like if I Google something and it comes up, it's something that is usable. It may not be. A lot of the reasons why districts are picking curriculum is because they have already gone through and done the research and looked at how these things are connected, and they have mapped them together in a way that is going to help your students really understand the concepts.
Absolutely.
Even though you've been teaching for a really long time, that doesn't necessarily mean that you are skilled enough to map that curriculum together in a way that's going to
Yes. I'm in the position because they saw that that's what I can do. So that's why I'm in that position to do that. And you know, you don't ever want to come in boasting or toot your own horn, but that's what I'm paid to do, is to do that. And so I would not trust myself to go and pull something 20 years ago. I don't care. I know how good of a math teacher I was, how great of a math teacher I was. I know that. I still wouldn't go do it. I can go right now in my garage and pull something that could look like something that I could teach right now because I got it. And I probably could finagle it to make it look like something. I could, but I'm not, because why would I do that when we've already, purchased and gotten materials to support that? I would never do that. I would never go and pay teacher. Why am I going to pay $3 or $4 or $5 for a whole thing when, oh, wow, y'all did purchase this for us, right? Yes, we did. We did. So I would never do that. I would never do that. I wouldn't. So, so that's the hard part, especially with math teachers. That's the hard part. It's the hard part with us.
So the main thing that I want listeners to take away from what Ms. Fowler just shared is the fact that the curriculum that has been purchased for your district was purchased for a reason. And although there probably isn't a curriculum out there that exists that covers 100% of the standards, the curriculum still was purchased to provide you with the resources that you need to do what you need to get done. And anything additional that you need, I'm pretty sure that your district is going to support you.
Absolutely.
That you have the coaches in the building, you have the people around you who can support you and help you fill in whatever is not covered with that curriculum. So
absolutely,
we want y'all to do the things that you came to do, which is planning and making sure that you are super prepared to go in there and teach at the highest level possible, because that tier 1 instruction is critical.
Yes. You can't intervene out of poor instruction. You can't. If we have tier 2 and tier 3 interventions, but core instruction is horrible, you can't intervene. You can't. You. There's no intervention possible that can help with that. If those teachers who are doing intervention, they have to reteach and do a whole lot more. If the content and immediate instruction that's given is poor, you can't do that. So tier 1 has got to be on point. You have got to be on point, and then you have to look at that data to see, oh, well, they do need tier 2 and tier 3 support. They do, but you don't know unless you do it from the get-go. So you can't intervene out of poorly taught content. You can't intervene yourself out of that.
And that's something I've been telling my teachers all year. We got to make sure that tier 1 is top tier, chef's kiss. Otherwise, absolutely, how are you creating small groups with the whole class? The whole class needed
that part. Class needed, exactly.
So we're going to save that conversation for another day, because that could open a whole can of worms.
Oh, absolutely, my love. Absolutely, sis.
Tara, thank you so much. This conversation has been packed with so much insight. Thank you for sharing your expertise on what it takes to truly prepare students for success in high school math, from building strong foundational skills and really not even thinking about it from a deficit mindset, but really looking at students with what they come to you with and meeting them there. It's clear that intentional planning and strategic instruction make all the difference. For those of you listening, I hope today's episode has given you practical strategies and big picture reflections to take back to your classrooms. Whether you're teaching middle school math or supporting students at the high school level, remember, preparation isn't just about the content. It's about the habits, it's about mindset, and the belief that every single student can thrive in math. If you found this episode valuable, don't forget to follow, leave a review, and share it with a colleague who needs to hear it. Thank you for tuning in to PD for the Soul. Keep making math happen, and I'll catch you guys in the next episode.